Hello, kiddies. This is the Crypt Keeper, and you're listening to Uncle Josh's true scary stories. Be careful what you ask for. You may get it.
Hey, campfire crew. Let's get it on. Hunted in the Woods by Tangerinable. When I was in college, a few of my high school friends and I still loved hanging out on weekends. I'll call my friends D, L, and K for this story. We would often sit in our local woods and buy some alcohol and have a few drinks together. One Saturday in July, we decided to head out to a forest a few miles away. It was daylight, and we planned to explore as much of it as possible before it got dark. The forest was really dense in most places, and a lot of daylight would be shrouded in shadow even when the sun was at its highest. But it was calm and peaceful. The forest was located behind a prison, which added some fear, but seeing as it was daylight, we didn't think about it too much. Once we stepped into the forest, we pushed our way through into the dense trees for around 45 minutes. We were chatting away and just catching up as friends do. And not long after, we saw something through the trees in the near distance, and when we reached it, we noticed it was a fully built small cabin. It was a hexagonal shape with thick log walls and sticks and mud for a roof. We noticed a huge deep fire pit next to it and trash everywhere. It looked as though it was recently used, and we were unsettled, but it was daylight and the forest was calm. We shared thoughts about who could have built it, and even suggested an escaped prisoner had wandered into the forest after escaping. Looking back on it now, an escaped prisoner wouldn't hide in the forest behind a prison he'd escaped from, and then build a cabin. But we were young, and I guess excited about a mystery. The cabin didn't have a door, so we knew there wasn't anything inside. We did go inside, though, to see what we could see, and when we all stepped in, we noticed a bunch of tools hanging on the log walls. Rusty saws, hammers, and screwdrivers. This unsettled us a little more, and we debated leaving before whoever built this returned. But because we were young adults and there were 4 of us, we thought it'd be okay and decided to not just stay, but to take the tools and head even deeper into the forest in an attempt to build our own cabin. After a few hours, we had only put up a few logs before we got bored, and we decided to call it a day and head back home. But we left the tools where we had started building our cabin, and neglected to return them. Fast forward a week later, we decided to head back to the forest and find that cabin to see if anything had changed. Before we set out, we bought a lot of hairspray and marshmallows from our local store so we could build a fire in the fire pit that we'd found. When we got to the forest, it was quite late and the sun was starting to set. The plan was we could have a glowing fire in the dark with our drinks and snacks. When we reached the cabin, we noticed it had been completely destroyed. All the logs had been torn down and were lying across the site. We debated what could have happened, but we figured that when the person or people who built it returned and found their tools had disappeared, maybe they just decided to tear down the cabin because it had been found. We were worried about someone coming back when we had our fire lit, but we also wanted to stick to the plan as much as possible. Because the forest was so dense, we decided to move to a different site and hoped the forest would conceal us as much as possible. We walked for around 30 minutes to a new spot, dug a fire pit, and lit the fire. And for a while, we had a great time. We had a few drinks, roasted marshmallows, and my friend L, who had brought his guitar, played us a few songs. After an hour or so, we saw flashlights between the trees some distance away, followed by shouting. We noticed that there were a few men heading towards us, but because the forest was so dense, it was slowing them down. We looked at each other and tried to come up with an idea. We knew the forest would be too hard to navigate in the dark, especially to the south where it became even thicker, and we'd be cornered. Me and Dee really wanted to run, but L and K thought they'd be caught anyway, and were going to try to either hide in the area or try to reason with these men who were coming towards us. Me and Dee, we ran for it. We didn't want to head to either side of the men because they could have cut us off, so the only option was south, into the deeper and thicker forest. We had a flashlight of our own, but we tried to hide as much of the light as possible so the men following would either lose us or not even see us at all. After a grueling 20 minutes of running through the forest, which had scratched almost every part of our bodies, we came to a barbed wire farmer's fence. We looked back and didn't see anything, but we could still hear the men in the distance. We knew we didn't have long, and the fence went on and on in both directions. We decided to climb it and hoped that the men wouldn't follow us, so both of us started to climb, and I managed to take my hoodie from around my waist and cover some of the barbed wire, but inevitably it did cut us anyway. We managed to make it over to the other side, and instead of continuing south, we decided to travel along the fence until we found a way back through and around the men. We had no idea what was happening to L and K, and we debated calling the police when we were able to, but we weren't supposed to be out there lighting fires, and we didn't want to get into trouble. After a while, we came across a section that we could hop over safely and into a less dense part of the forest. We didn't have any signal on our phones and couldn't call either L or K to see if they were okay, so we continued on a little while longer, and then came across an exit to the forest. We couldn't hear anything from behind us, but we could now see some houses in the distance. We decided to head to one of them and under street lamps before deciding what to do next. But as we got closer, we could see that K and L were already under a street lamp near the houses. We tore over to them and asked them what had happened. They told us that they had decided to hide because L did have his guitar and couldn't effectively run with it. And it worked. The men arrived at the fire just as K and L hid behind some logs outside of the firelight. They said that the men looked to be a lot older than us and seemed really aggressive with what they thought were crowbars or something similar. As the men were shouting for us and talking, L and K managed to make their escape. As they were walking towards the edge of the forest, they noticed a pickup truck parked on a logging trail with its headlights on, but no one inside, and they assumed it was their truck. So then they just ran out and towards the local houses, where we eventually found them. We've been back to that forest a few more times, but we never venture in as deep as we had been before. And yeah, when we go back, we only went during the day. Scariest Moment of My Life by Scary You. When this happened, it was at night, late at night, around 9 or 10. I had gotten in a car with 4 other girls and 3 guys, and I'll call them Kylie, Leslie, Sarah, and Maria. Let's call the guys Noah, Alex, and Sammy. We were on our way to Gainesville just for fun, photos, and a night away from home. We got to Gainesville about 2 hours later, 11:30 or 12. We took photos at a basketball court and then headed to a hotel that was about 7 or 8 stories tall. Across the street was a small Wawa. We were next to a highway with a bridge and a road highway crossing over the intersection, and next to the intersection was a forest-type landscape, lots of trees. So we went inside, got settled in, and then ended up going back out into the parking lot to smoke, and everyone was drinking except for me. Little did I know the scariest moment of my life was about to occur. We were all in the parking lot except Sammy. We were all smoking and some drinking until Leslie started getting scared and walking in a fast pace away from the group. All the girls said she was just trying to play around or she was tripping. I was the only one who followed her to make sure she was okay. I followed her between 2 cars from the group, and they just sat on the back of our vehicle. As I followed her, she got more scared and looked like she was almost going to cry. She said, "It's coming." And my heart dropped as I was confused. I tried to calm her down, asking what was coming. She got more and more upset, just continued to say, "It's coming, bro." Not even a few seconds after she said it the second time, we heard a deafening scream. This scream didn't sound human or made by an animal. It made my heart drop to where something just told me that it wasn't human or an animal. But the weirdest part of the situation is, I jogged up to the group, and none of them were fazed. I asked everyone, "Didn't you just hear that?" And they hadn't, which was impossible. It was deafening how loud the scream was. Leslie and I ran into the hotel from the parking lot and even asked the person at the front desk. This was something you could hear from inside the hotel as well. They didn't hear anything either. And of course, we looked crazy, as if we were on some type of drugs. And we just said never mind and went up to the hotel room, and both of us were speechless. We were wondering how no one else had heard it but us, and having no idea what was going on or what it was. We got into our hotel room and tried to explain it to Sammy, who was still there. It looked even more crazy to him, and he said maybe we should go to sleep or something. But both of us glanced out the window towards where we had heard the scream, and we saw a lot of police vehicles, and what looked like SWAT heading in that direction too. They didn't have any sirens or lights on, which made the situation even more eerie. To this day, I'll never understand or know what that thing really was, and what my friend meant by, "it was coming." I just hope it never happens again. And I wish I could find some answers to what it was. I haven't spoken to my friend who said those words in a while, and I was thinking of reaching out to her, to ask her what she remembers. What Happened Between Colorado and Wyoming by Curious Thoughts. I'm sharing this as an experience, not written fiction. This did happen to me, and it still sends chills down my spine to this day. I used to travel for work, doing photography and taking photos of undeveloped parcels of land for real estate investors. It was a fun job, but by no means was it easy. A lot of times I'd have to hike out to parcels because there was no road access, then find my way through unfamiliar terrain with outdated maps at best, not to mention dealing with locals who could either be curious or hostile. This was my first out-of-state trip on my own, as the other person who was supposed to go with me had gotten into an accident and was bedridden. Knowing the drive just to get to my first destination would be a multi-hour one, between 6 and 7 hours if I recall, I slept all that day in preparation. I wanted to be in Rawlins, Wyoming around sunrise so I could eat, download my offline maps, and start combing over GPS satellite images to find a way to my first parcel. I settled in and started my drive around 11 p.m., well-rested, well-packed, and fully stocked on road snacks, caffeine, and smokes. Winding through the windy mountain passes, taking in the view under the moonlight, and jamming out to my tunes. Things were going well for the first 4 hours or so. Then I hit a fog bank, somewhere between Kremling and Walden, Colorado. The fog was incredibly thick, which prompted me to slow way down. I was glad I did, because around a particularly sharp bend, I got stopped by a huge herd of elk. They were posted up all over the road as far as I could see in the fog. It was kind of chilling. Now, my thought process at the time was, I need to get moving before some fool turns that corner and plows into me or the elk. So I rolled my window down and hollered at them, "Get a job!" And I was met with that particular silence that only heavy fog or snow brings, only broken by the occasional shuffle from one of the elk, none of which paid me even the slightest of mind. That was until about a minute later. "Get a job!" My voice, unmistakably, coming from the opposite side of the elk herd, the direction I was headed. The elk? They very much paid attention to that voice. They bolted back past me in a panic, and one even slammed into the side mirror of my vehicle. As soon as they were clear, I gunned it. I've never driven so fast before or after in a fog. If there was going to be some creepy thing waiting for me out there in the fog on that road, well, it'd meet the front grille of that lifted Grand Cherokee long before it got to me. I drove until I was forced to stop for gas, I believe in Saratoga, Wyoming. I was pretty shaken. Nothing else unsettling happened on that trip, despite staying in the allegedly haunted hotel of Medicine Bow, Wyoming. I was actually allowed to stay in the historical section as everything else was booked up. Very kind of the hotel owners, but I'm sorry to say I did not have anything spooky happen during my stay there. Perhaps the ghosts knew I had already had enough of a fright. So, that's it. Honestly, the encounter was creepy as heck, and I'm grateful that was as far as it went.
The Hospital, submitted by Tony J. When I was a kid growing up in a medium-sized town in Indiana, we often went on urban explorations, although back then it was never really called that. It was just called going outside and fucking around. Back then, you got on your bike after breakfast, went God knows where, I'm sure our parents had no idea where we were going, and we came back for dinner, and then went back out again in the evening and didn't come home until the streetlights came on. It's just the way it was. There was an abandoned hospital on the edge of our town that had been closed since I was about 2 years old. The story I'm going to tell you takes place in 1989 and involves my friends and I and our interesting and terrifying visit to the hospital one night. The hospital was often used by older kids as a place to party and hang out. I mean, a lot of people did it. The cops knew it and often went out there to check on the place, but because it wasn't really near any residential neighborhoods, no one was really causing any serious problems, and only if things sounded or felt like they were getting out of hand did the cops actually go out there. Unless there were specific complaints. It just seemed like they knew that it was a place where kids were going to do stuff, even though it might have been illegal, and they looked the other way. I've often believed that this was all due to it being out of the way, and they just didn't feel like going out there. Who knows? So anyway, my friends and I decided one evening after dinner to go out there. We got flashlights and stuff that we thought we would need, like pocket knives and things like that. Got on our bikes and rode out to the hospital. We got there in the later evening, with maybe an hour and a half of light left in the day. The hospital itself was set off from a fairly well-traveled road, but the parking lot and entrance driveway had long been since filled in with grass and weeds. Gave it a pretty creepy feel. I mean, it was abandoned, and it looked the part. I will mention that some people said the place was haunted and talked about the ghosts of mental patients being in there and all the trauma and awfulness that they went through somehow still sticking around. But I don't know of anyone in my group of friends or our extended ring around us that ever saw or experienced anything like that. The place was creepy, but I highly doubt it was haunted, and that doesn't mean that freaks and weirdos didn't spend time there, though. We got to the edge of the property and began to make our way through the tall grass to get to the hospital itself. Over the years, well-worn paths had been made through it, and you could follow them easily in the daytime. We walked our bikes about halfway through and then ditched them on the side of the path so that anyone driving on the road wouldn't notice that anyone was back there. We made our way up to the hospital and got through a window that was easily accessible. There were many ways to get inside the place, and I think this was probably the most popular, though. Yes, many of the doors were boarded up and had locks and that sort of thing, but a lot of the windows were missing, and it just made it easy for anyone to get in. We immediately got into a staircase and went to the third floor and walked around looking at all the crazy graffiti everywhere, the abandoned furniture, and other stuff that had been left there over the years and never really moved. Plenty of trash, empty beer cans, cigarette butts, you name it. I did hear that one section of the place had been cleared out by some skateboarders, and at one point they'd even put a half-pipe ramp in there. I never saw it, but that's what I heard. And it does make sense, because that's exactly what I would have done had I been a skateboarder. There wasn't much to see on the third floor other than the empty rooms and stuff, and we were just standing in one room where a tree branch had grown through the window frame. As we sat there talking about what we should do next, I grabbed onto the branch and began to swing it back and forth, banging it off the edges of the window frame. And by the way, there were 4 of us there: TJ, Steve, Greg, and me. I stopped banging the tree for a second, and in the lull between that noise and our conversation, we heard loud banging coming from somewhere else in the building. We stopped and listened and figured, I guess we're not the only ones out here. And then we heard a blood-curdling female scream from somewhere deep in the hospital. I won't lie, it freaked us out, and it did sound creepy as hell. Then everything went silent. Before anyone could say anything, I banged on the frame with the tree branch again, and just like before, deep from somewhere in the hospital, we heard 3 bangs in response. Determined to figure out who else was out there, figuring maybe it was some other group of our friends, we left the room and went down to the 2nd floor and walked all through it. Again, just more of the same stuff that was on the 3rd floor, but no other people. We got back down to the 1st floor and went to a wing that we really hadn't gone to before, and I mentioned to my friends, hey, maybe that's where the skate ramp is. So while we were looking for this other party we believed to be in the hospital, we were also kind of on a quest to find this elusive ramp. We took a break after a few minutes to see if we could hear anything, and again, we did. Somewhere off in the distance, we heard some strange music and murmuring voices. By now, the sun had gone down, and it was very dark inside the walls of this place. There was a little bit of light trickling in, but we flicked on our flashlights as maneuvering through all the junk and debris was starting to become a little difficult. We paused again and listened, and heard the music, now a little bit louder, and then I saw a faint light kind of flickering, and coming from a room about 4 doors down from where we stood. We just figured the people that we were looking for were there, and so as not to surprise anyone, we took a vote of who should go down and check things out. Well, it was my night to lose, and I got stuck going down there to see what was up by myself. As I made my way closer to the flickering light, I heard more of the murmuring and realized that it sounded more like chanting. I mean, not loud Gregorian chants, just this low-key chanting. I got close to the door and slowly peeked my head around, and what I saw scared the bejesus out of me. There was a group of people wearing black sweatshirts standing in a circle. I want to stress they weren't wearing ceremonial robes or anything like that. They were just wearing black sweatshirts, the kind with hoods. I guess hoodie is the hip term. They were standing in a circle around a small fire, and I noticed the walls were covered with the kind of graffiti you'd imagine would be there. 666, pentagrams, upside-down crosses, all kinds of stuff like that. The group was doing this little chant when one picked up what looked like a silver thermos and started to pass it around. One figure on the other side of the group that I could see took the thermos and took a swig. There was a reddish liquid inside, and I was sure it was blood, because it kind of smeared on her face. Yes, her. It was a female drinking what I could only think was blood. She looked up, and our eyes made contact. She immediately raised her hand and pointed at me and screamed that awful scream we had heard earlier. It shocked me so much that I stumbled backwards across the entire corridor away from the door and smashed my back into the far wall. My friends saw what was going on and jumped up, and I just turned to them and started running, screaming, "Run, run, run!" And we all did, and we kept running as fast as we could back to the window entrance where we had come in from, and I occasionally looked over my shoulder to see this group of people in sweatshirts running after us in the dark. They never yelled or screamed or anything, but they were in hot pursuit. We flew out of the window, out into the overgrown parking lot, and quickly made it back to the trail where our bikes were. We grabbed them, and not even bothering to try to ride out on the path, we just ran alongside them to the edge of the grass that finally led to the road. There we collapsed in a heap and tried to catch our breath, and everyone started asking me what I had seen. I mean, they knew we were being chased, but they wanted to know what the scream was about and what had happened before they started chasing after us. Before I could open my mouth, from out of the grass came the sweatshirt people. They looked right at us, and for a terrifying moment, I think all of us thought we were dead. We were all just frozen there, sitting on the ground. The sweatshirt people? They burst into laughter. They couldn't stop laughing. It turns out it was a group of high school kids a little older than us who were doing this as a goof to freak out people who came out to the hospital to do urban exploration. They all walked over to us, and one of them slapped me on the back and said I was priceless, and that he felt like he should give me some money for the performance I put on being so scared. Suddenly, all of the tension and fear was gone from me and my friends, and we started laughing too. We asked them how long they had been doing this, and they said ever since they had heard an erroneous story on a local TV station about satanic rituals and Dungeons and Dragons taking over the minds of youth. They'd only encountered a few other groups in the time they started doing it, but they said whenever they did it, it was so worthwhile that they kept it up. The guy who had talked to me first said, "You guys want in on this too?" Of course we did. We joined them for more than one occasion and did scare the hell out of other people who had no idea what was going on when they came out to check out the hospital. I'm actually laughing about this right now as I type it out. So many fun instances of scaring the shit out of people and having them convinced we were satanic worshippers was a hysterical time. Nothing like some beer-fueled mayhem with your pals scaring other people, I guess. And the more I think about it, it's kind of the equivalent of the haunted houses and mazes that are all over the place now around Halloween time. Except nobody was paying for it, and they certainly weren't expecting it, which made it even more fun and scary. So, yeah, I thought I would share a story that was kind of a mix of being terrified and then playing the role of Terrifier. I hope this story makes its way onto your channel, and I just want to say to everyone, be safe out there. And remember, not everything you see is a ghost. Not every devil worshiper is really worshiping the devil. It might just be a group of people out to give you a good scare. Uncle Josh note here. Yeah, having lived in the 80s, I do remember the whole satanic Dungeons and Dragons crackdown, the Mazes and Monster movie that Tom Hanks starred in that blew everybody's mind. And oh boy, a lot of parents were freaking out back then. I remember my mom did not want me listening to Black Sabbath. The records were not allowed in my house. Super funny. She had no idea what the songs were about or anything. She just saw the words Black Sabbath, and yeah, that's how it goes. She's over that by now. She knows who Black Sabbath is. Anyway, thanks for the story. Hope you guys enjoyed it too.
Walk in the Forest by Jam Jam Point. One night, around 10 or 11, my dad decided that we should go camping. You see, our family is the adventure type, so deciding to go camping late at night was kind of normal for us. We had a place in mind, a forest where my mom had property, so off we went. When we arrived, my father and I set up tents and got a campfire going, and after everything settled down, I grabbed some peanuts and went to take a stroll in the forest. It was very calming. All I could hear was the swaying of the trees and leaves brushing against each other. I felt like I was a main character in a movie. Everything was so perfect, until I saw something. It was a creature around 8 feet tall, and it had like reindeer horns and a wolf-like face. One thing I learned from my family is that life is not a movie where you can survive situations like this. So I ran. I didn't look back, and I didn't fall down like some character on a Scream movie. But I bumped into someone, and I couldn't really see what he looked like because the only light source I had was the moon. Yeah, call me stupid for not carrying a flashlight. This person grabbed me by the shoulder and signaled me to keep quiet, pointing a direction with his other hand. He pushed me softly into that direction, and I didn't waste any of my time. I just ran away. Surprisingly, I was back at our campsite, and my mom and dad were already asleep. Me? I didn't sleep that night. I was fully awake and alert. The next morning, I told everything to my parents, and all they did was laugh. And I was like, "Hey, why are you all laughing? I almost died." Dad just patted my head and walked to the riverside to wash our stuff. My mom looked at me and kissed my forehead, and all she said was, "Be careful next time." And this was 3 years ago. But I still have no idea what that creature was that I saw, and who that man was that helped me. Every time I bring it up to my family, they constantly change the subject. But one thing is for sure, though. All I know is that I did see something. And I know I bumped into someone out in that forest. And he pointed me back to my campsite. All of that is true. A Night at Brushy Mountain by Brilliant Horses. On a road trip, a friend and I decided to stop at Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary and camp nearby. We knew the history of the place and had read up on it on the way there. A friend of my friend came along, and she was very into the spiritual side of things and wanted to look for ghosts. That was mostly her interest, though we were all curious about the prison itself. In person, the place is imposing. It's a huge gray prison set hard against the mountain wall, surrounded by thick Tennessee woods. The trees and hills feel alive, and then there's this massive block of concrete sitting amongst it, unnatural in its shape and weight. There were no tours or concerts scheduled that day, and the place felt quiet. We parked in a clear lot and walked up toward the building, and when we reached the courtyard, we were surprised to find the gate open. There were no signs stopping us, so we went in and began looking around. There were two men in the courtyard throwing a ball for a large dog. We noticed them but didn't think too much of it until the dog wandered over to us. And when that happened, one of the men came over and started talking. Instead of asking us where we were from, he asked why we were there. He pressed to know if we were part of a tour. Once he knew we weren't, he said that he was contracted by the owner to do some work there and that we were not supposed to be there. He didn't explain what he was doing or why the gate was open, but once he knew we were just visitors, he became short and insistent. We left the building respectfully without making a scene. But we stayed at the prison and continued walking around. My friend pointed out how odd it was that someone on official business would be working with a dog loose in the courtyard, but we didn't linger on it. We were still more interested in the building than anything else. Not long after that, a white crossover pulled into the lot and came right up on us. There was a woman with a kid inside, and the woman got out and immediately pushed us toward the exit. She said her man had just spoken to us and that we were not allowed out there. My friend pushed back some, but we still left. And as we did, the woman followed us and shut the parking lot gate behind us. Once outside the site, we checked the rules and knew that we could be there, and it was a common thing for people to be out exploring. Later that night, we went back. We parked in the outer lot and waited. While standing by the car, we saw a truck drive slowly the length of the road leading up toward the prison. We were in the dark and it didn't see us, and it continued slowly back. We talked it over. We could drive in, but if we went straight in and got run off, that would be it. But if we went on foot around the drive and up the hill first, we could look around and still come back the right way. So we climbed the grassy hill beside the road, staying out of the parking lot lights. At intervals, a bright light swept up into the sky from the prison. We figured it was part of the place. A spotlight might be left running for effect. As we moved along the hill, we heard what sounded like a dirt bike somewhere beyond the lot. The noise bounced off the hills and then cut out. Not long after that, we heard screaming. It was distant and fearful. We stopped and listened, and it happened again. We whispered among ourselves, trying to decide if it was someone else there, or maybe somebody on a tour. As we stood there, we all noticed something in the dark near us. A wild pig. We hadn't seen it at first, and it shifted and started towards us. My friend grabbed both of us without hesitation and pulled us back, and he had seen wild pigs before, so we backed away quickly and then ran for the car. At that point, we assumed there had to be other people at the prison. The light sweeping the sky and the sound of the dirt bike made it seem active, like there was something going on. So we drove back in openly, like we were supposed to be there. As we passed the road, we saw the same truck parked off to the side. The kid in the back was screwing with a flashlight, pointing it up into the sky, and the man was behind the truck running a chainsaw. The woman was nearby in her white crossover, just watching the road. She pulled out quickly and blocked us, and rolled down her window and immediately threatened to call the police. My friend told her we had checked the hours, and she said she knew the owner but would not give a name or a phone number. So we left again, and once we were back on the road, we called the police. They told us that we were allowed to be out there, but advised us to not return that night, and said it might not be safe. We never found out what those people were doing. Nothing that happened on its own would have meant much. Any one part of the night could be explained away. But taken together, it all added up to something strange, and that is what stayed with us.
Hey gang, as you well know, from time to time I want to share music from friends of mine that are creating really great stuff, and I am super stoked to be sharing this awesome track from Katria. She has a new album out called Modern M. I hope that you will go check it out on YouTube and all of her social platforms, accompanied by the band Modern English. Yeah, that Modern English. How freaking cool is that? So, without any further ado, everybody sit back, relax, and enjoy Skipping Stones.
Stones now, they're just skin and bones now. They're setting the stone now. They're casting the bones.
Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode. If you have a true scary story of any nature that you'd like me to narrate, email it to unclejosh.truescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. If you're catching this on YouTube and you like what you heard and saw, why not give the video a thumbs up, share it with a friend, leave a comment. I'd love to know what you thought of the stories. It's all free and it all helps out with the algorithms, so I appreciate it. Follow me on social media, and if you'd like to take your support a step further, find a link to my Patreon page in the description and consider getting some Uncle Josh and Campfire Crew merchandise. A link to my TeePublic storefront is also in the description. Everyone, be excellent to each other, and until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything: a ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.